to the Thought Snob Podcast. I'm Paula Swope. Let's get snobby. Welcome to the Thought Snob Podcast, a platform dedicated to your personal growth and empowerment. I'm your host, Paula Swope. Allow me to introduce my guest, Alana Higginbotham, a renowned figure in the field of personal development, known to many as the Mental Strategist. Alana is an accomplished author and radio show host, a certified life coach, and a professional speaker. Her dedication to her roles as a homeschooling mom of two and a loving wife is as admirable as her professional achievements. Mental health awareness and education are always at the forefront of the conversations we have on the Thought Snob podcast. And Alana is a survivor of depression, overwhelm, and anxiety. She set out to create a platform to put people back into the driver's seat of their lives by giving them the tools to govern their own minds. Starting with publishing her book, The Mental Breakdown, she launched a journey to equip others to get back into the driver's seats of their lives. Her work is quite impressive, which is why she is here with me today. Alana facilitates masterclasses, workshops, corporate training, and group coaching to help people regain their power and clean up their head trash. She is also an advocate for mental health and empowerment among parents of autism, tailoring her tools to uplift them on their very special journey. This woman is a powerhouse for mental improvement and fights daily to make its importance known. She is truly passionate about her work. Alana, welcome to the show.
Man, who is this Alana chick?
Oh my God. Listen, I've got my warrior hair on because I am in the presence of a warrior.
You better understand. Okay, you're absolutely right about that. The dragons that I have slayed, okay?
Yes, and we're going to talk about that. And so I would just like for our listeners to know how we got acquainted and how this podcast interview came to fruition. And so we've been going back and forth about collaborating for a while. I mean, it's been a few months, really.
Yeah,
but what finally landed us here was the video that I posted about saying no without over-explaining. And you commented that you were an expert at this and that it's way simpler than I think. Mm-hmm. And despite, making significant strides in my ability to say no, I still catch myself with that over-explaining. And it's just like a habit I can't seem to break. I'm really eager to learn from your experiences and understand how you've mastered this skill. I have a feeling our conversation is going to go pretty deep. And so I'm just going to kick it off with this. As so many people have a problem with, so we get good at saying no.
Yes.
And then we start, blah, 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 blah. Right?
Yes. And you would be shocked at the caliber of people who have a hard time with that. I have a client who is what I would consider to be a high power physician. And then when you say this person is a doctor and they're the chief of staff, I mean, if you've ever seen Grey's Anatomy, you know that the chief of staff is a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So you would never imagine that a person in that position would have a hard time saying no. What I have found is that how people show up in their profession is very different than how they show up in their personal life, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
A large part of my work as a coach has been to connect the two. Because the truth about it is, anytime we're having a challenge over here in one area, we possess the prowess to do that thing. We just do it in another area because we haven't connected the two. And so one of the interesting things I find about saying no without a lengthy explanation that a lot of people will find to be interesting is that there are some cases where it's perfectly okay to explain no. And on top of that, with that, there are some cases where there are people who explaining yourself is not going to get you anywhere.
Right.
Because they don't really care why you're saying no. They're trying to get you to a yes. So in you explaining yourself to them, what they're really doing is they are qualifying your no. And so I just learned, in much the same way I'm sure you do in your professional life,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who you're dealing with, maybe you're dealing with a vendor, or maybe you're dealing with, the publishing company. Sometimes, depending on the situation, the no feels better to you if there's an explanation with it.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, that explanation won't necessarily be lengthy, right?
Sure.
And so the reason why I say that it's simple is because the only reason why we feel like we need to explain ourselves is because what we want and what we know to do butts up against other people's expectations of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the cat that's the tough part. That's the thing that makes it hard. We know that all we need to tell this person is no, but we also know, based on the role they play in our life. Because
Mm-hmm.
if they are your mom, your mother-in-law, your cousin, your aunt, then there's going to be a history there that makes you feel like you need to explain yourself. But just like you got them accustomed to having an explanation, you can get them accustomed to having no explanation.
Yeah, I love that. Were you like previously a person that would have trouble with saying no, or is this something that's always kind of been natural for you?
I feel like my natural tendency is to be honest about how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
But because I grew up in the same world you grew up in, and in the South, where,
Mm-hmm.
being nice is more important than being kind. I tell people all the time, I am not nice. I am very kind, but I am not nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned, okay, if I want to decrease the tension here, I got to start being nice. And when I say nice, nice people say things that necessarily aren't true to keep the peace, or to appeal to your ego. So
Mm-hmm.
if you ask me as a friend, Alana, do you think this dress is flattering on me? I'm going to tell you that it's not, if it's not. And side note, I used to own a makeup artistry and wardrobe styling firm. So I'm pretty confident when it
Your
comes,
opinion, your
yeah,
opinion means something. Yeah.
right. But
Right.
you'd be shocked at the number of people who know that will ask me what I think about something, and then downplay what I think about it. Listen, it's on you. And so I just there was a transition where I was spending some time, some years, if not a whole decade or more, saying yes to things that I didn't want to say yes to. And that's where the depression, the overwhelm, and the anxiety comes from, because all three of those things are present when you are acting outside of who you were created to be. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of a great visual is if you were headed down I-45 and you saw a 747 jet in one of the lanes
Mm-hmm.
driving on the freeway. Just because you have the capacity to do something doesn't mean that you have the bandwidth to do that thing, right?
Right.
And by doing something, saying yes to something, and morphing yourself into this person, play this or thing, you endanger not only yourself, but you endanger the people around you.
I honestly spent the first, I'm going to say, probably 3 decades of my life
Mhm.
really doing things that I didn't want to do. And it did continue on into my 30s. I'm 47 now. I've come leaps and bounds.
Me too.
But there's something that I noticed about myself. Well, there's a lot of things I noticed about myself, but this was a really bizarre observation that I made about myself. When I threw myself into situations, like I'm talking consistently, day in, day out. For example, being in a job that I truly hated,
Mhm.
or just saying yes because I was used to doing that. When the last thing I wanted to do was say yes, I started to lose my voice. I've never talked like really loud, but I just got to the point that my voice sounded weak, and I could like feel it in my throat.
That's a
And
profound
right?
physical manifestation of a mental and emotional challenge.
Yes. I became keenly aware of the damage that I was doing to myself, not only, mentally, but physically too, by saying yes to all this stuff that I didn't want to do. And that was a real breakthrough for me to stop that shit. I mean, I
Yes.
had to stop that shit.
It was literally physically harming you.
Yes. And I wasn't able to really attract things that I wanted because I wasn't doing anything that
What
I
you wanted.
wanted to do. And so I mean, and so what does the universe, the higher power, think of that? I mean, my actions were saying, okay, this is what I want, when it was like the opposite. And so it was just a really tug of war. And when I put an end to it, oh man, everything changed. My health, everything, my
The
finances.
flowers were brighter.
Yeah,
The music
it was
sounds
incredible.
sweeter.
Yeah, it was incredible. And so now I'm trying to get just really really good at that. Just know and say it with kindness. I don't ever want to hurt anyone's feelings, but
Mhm.
at the same time, I'm absolutely in this day and time going to prioritize my health over placating.
Yeah. And you're going to hurt some people's feelings.
You're right.
Yeah. You're going to have to do it um almost like you don't give a shit. Because the truth is we do. Like we really do, but what ends up happening is you have to do it anyway. And that's true for, I mean, think about it, Paula. We're both 47. In 47 years, everything that you've ever done, you had to do it pushing through the fear, not you
Mm-hmm.
figured out a way to overcome the fear and then you did it. You just have to push through. And the truth is, these people don't understand your value. They don't understand your value because they're looking at you through the lens of probably knowing you since you were a kid,
Mm-hmm.
or they're looking at you through the lens of their limited understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So I have seen grown women that when I say no to them, they literally pout. Like this, I'm not even talking about the adult version of pouting. I'm talking about like the next time I see them, I walk into the room and they're just like, don't want to talk because I said no, and uh,
Mm-hmm.
you also have to take into consideration that people live in their own world where they have made an assessment of your relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And because of how we are, they put you on a pedestal. And so they expect certain things from you. And because they do that, oftentimes when you just very simply, you say no, you say the same thing that Aunt Mabel said, but
Mm-hmm.
Aunt Mabel ain't you. And because
Mm-hmm.
Aunt Mabel ain't you, when you say no, they look at you like, well, who the hell she thinks she is?
Mm-hmm.
You said something one time. I loved this term. I had never heard it before. You said that your dad told you once that you were getting above your raisin.
Oh yeah.
I love that terminology, but it basically
Yeah.
means the same thing. You think you're too much. And
Mm-hmm.
here's the caveat to that. You are. You are too much more than what they can handle. And because of that, they expect you to, at the very least, do what they want you to do.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
you end up buying into that programming and your subconscious, because you don't want to say yes. And really and truly, if you when you think about it, you actually don't care what they think about you. But for some reason, 6-year-old Paula
Mm-hmm.
rises up when it's time to say, I'm not coming to the baby shower. And you think you got to come up with this long list of things and a concrete reason why you're not going to the baby shower when
Mm-hmm.
no is enough. I'm not coming because I don't feel well. Which, by the way, is one of the best ways to say no, because the truth is, you do not feel well about being in their energy.
Oh my God. That is fantastic because it goes back to what I was telling you about me, my voice becoming weak.
Yes,
Well,
you can
if I,
physically become sick.
yes, absolutely. And I was sick a lot, when I was living my life like that. And so I'm going to use that because that is the truth that that's
It's
not even a
not a
lie. It's
lie.
like, because if I say yes to something I don't want to do, I'm not going to feel well. I'm going to be pissed. I'm going to be miserable, and I'm going to pay
And
for it
you
for days
might
to come.
actually physically become sick.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to guard my energy to the point of,
Absolutely.
of no return. And when I
Absolutely.
yeah, and when I really started educating myself and getting the big picture and how important that my energy was and is, I started really becoming aware of that. Awareness is the foundation, in my opinion, of all change. But that
Absolutely.
awareness with me caused me to act different. It influenced my actions. When I started behaving differently and not giving them giving people what they wanted, and I became
Whoa.
confident. I was acting different. I was more confident. I wasn't just going along with conversations and going along, with anything. I
Yes.
was told that I was so stuck up that I'm surprised I hadn't drowned when it rained, right? Okay. Well, and all I was doing was just being who I was meant to be. And who I was meant to be was not this little sheepish say yes type of gal that took abuse. But for whatever reason, I did that for the first 3 decades of my life. And the awakening piece of this is why I'm doing the work that I'm doing now. And I'm sure you probably had some type of an awakening at some point too, because I was very, very curious. What brought you to this line of work?
Well, it's very similar to um, your upbringing. I feel it's a great place to underscore when people grow up and are raised in an atmosphere that makes them feel disadvantaged, the way and almost powerless,
Mm-hmm.
many times, almost by default, the way that they give themselves some sort of air of goodness is that they villainize the people who are quote unquote doing better than them. So I don't really consider it being better, I'm just doing something different.
Right.
And so they often villainize the people who are doing better than them. And in so doing, they start to believe their own rhetoric. So when you have the audacity to want to, girl, it could be something like you want to eat salmon. Now, oh, you eating
Mm-hmm.
salmon now? Okay, salmon
Mm-hmm.
is not that luxurious. Let's pipe down for just a moment. Okay.
Right.
Second of all, I just said I like the buttery, creamy taste of it when you bake it in the oven. And
Mm-hmm.
now, because I'm making this change, it's like a little bit of a friction, right? Because they have created this bubble of safety around them. And it's a fiction bubble of safety. It's fictitious. And so, because of that, when you come in and you prick that bubble with the slightest thing, because see, it doesn't feel like that big of a deal to you, Paula,
Mm-hmm.
because it's literally how you were made. For me, it was the same thing. I, this personality that I have, it came with the package. I
Mm-hmm.
did not develop into this girl. So if you can imagine, and here's the deal. I get it. Can you imagine being a kindergarten teacher dealing with this personality in a 5-year-old? Like that would be a lot for anybody,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so early on in my life, I knew the truth about myself.
I did
But
too.
I know you did because we come here knowing. We come here
Mm-hmm.
knowing. But what happens is the programming begins to try to steer us differently. Like, I'm sure, have you read the Four Agreements?
No, I have not.
One of the things that Don Miguel Ruiz talks about is, I think there's another name that he uses, but essentially, as people, we're trained almost like dogs. We're
Mm-hmm.
trained that This is how it's supposed to be. This is how you're supposed to wear your hair. And even as people like you and I evolve, Paula, we don't even realize that we hold on to certain things. I've gotten to the place in my journey where I think I've pretty much let go of everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's really not anything you could come to me and tell me you are involved in that I would judge you for. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean anything, because I realize that everybody is on this planet going through their own journey, and it behooves me and my life and my journey to be open to all the possibilities, because then my life can then be open to all the possibilities. And so, even though I knew early on that I was not, my husband has coined the term bus people.
Mm-hmm.
I am not a bus person. A bus person is someone who gets on the bus and they go with the flow and they just allow the bus to take them where the bus is supposed to go. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I were having this conversation because after being together for 29 years, we were having the conversation about, me being able to be myself around people. And he said, babe, I realized that um, I became a bus person. And he said, it actually frazzled me that you were not a bus person. And he said, for a lot of years, I just remember standing in behind the scenes, wishing you would just get on the bus. Why won't she just get on the bus? And he said, sometimes I would react to you when we were around friends and family because I didn't want them to know that that I had become okay with you not being on the bus. I didn't want it to be known that your way of thinking was going to affect, my way of thinking, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And that really changed our relationship. Even after 29 years, I didn't know that it could get deeper or better,
Mm-hmm.
but it did, because he was essentially saying that he's actually not a bus person either, and that he understands that I just wasn't created that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so because I was not created that way, I cannot any longer exist in a space where people expect me to do a thing simply because that's what they believe is the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally, as an adult woman, mom and wife, I had to turn it around and go back to my memories of being a kid where I wasn't a bus person. Well, I still am not a bus person, but
Mm-hmm.
and I just had to remember, okay, well, what would Alana in the fifth grade have said? How would Alana have? And what I learned is, and this is not everybody's story, but what I learned is my parents have a respect for me and how I do things. So I didn't necessarily have to, you know, completely change my relationship with my parents, because it's just a different situation. It's not gonna, I can do the exact same thing, or I can tell you to do the exact same thing with your parents, and it wouldn't work because it's a different dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my parents and I kind of almost grew up together, you know?
Mm.
I was,
Interesting.
I'm the firstborn. They were, in their early 20s. And so we all bumped our heads together. And my parents also have a lot of respect for my husband and myself. So when my parents come into my circle, they don't treat me like a kid. They have respect for how I do things. And one of the reasons is not just because of the kind of people my parents are, but also because, I mean, any idiot can look at my life and see she must be doing something right.
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of the things I get consistently from people who are just meeting me or people who've known me for a while is, God, Alana, your house is so peaceful. It's intentional.
Mm-hmm.
There are people, places, and things that don't cross the threshold of that door or even pull up in front of this house, because I grew up in a traumatic, tumultuous childhood, and I know what that looks like, and
Mm-hmm.
it ain't welcome here.
Mm-mm. Oh no, I'll put you on the bus
Yeah,
if that
absolutely.
happens.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
bus can come. The
Uh-huh.
bus people, the bus
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, there's no room for that here either. And it's funny that you say that, because people say that to us too. They're like, there's such a good vibe in this house. And We love it here and I feel good when I'm here. And I'm like, that's intentional.
Because I know what the opposite feels like.
Yeah. And I couldn't go back to that. I couldn't go back to that for nothing.
Yeah. I don't even think, like, I've reached the place in my life, Paula, where, how people say, oh, I could just never do that. I used to say that thinking I would never choose that. But
Mm-hmm.
really, I'm at a place right now where I wouldn't even know how to get there.
Me either.
And if you told me how to get there, my brain couldn't even comprehend it.
Mm-mm.
So, to answer your question, I came to this place because I spent ultimately, like the big bang of it all,
Mm-hmm.
is I started to dial my life way back. I spent 12 years in ministry leadership. I stopped being in ministry leadership. I came out of the workforce years ago when my 21-year-old was like 3.5, 4. But I also still had businesses on the side. And so when my oldest son was, because I homeschool,
Mm-hmm.
so my oldest son was of high school age, I closed down my makeup artistry and wardrobe styling firm. And so I stopped doing even that and just focused in. And the more I pulled things away from my life, the more time I had with me. And that, I'm not gonna lie to you, that was scary. There were several times throughout the journey, and I've been homeschooling for 14 years. There were several times throughout the journey of the introspective, doing the inner work that I didn't know if I was gonna make it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't because I was sick. It was because mentally I was like, this shit is hard, and I see why people check out.
Oh, yeah.
I see why people get so overwhelmed, and I see why the world is like, but Robin Williams brought so much joy to so many people. It don't matter a damn bit what's going on out here. It matters what's going on inside here.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just grateful that I have the support system in my husband and my two sons to have arrived at this place. And I do believe, because of the blood, sweat, and tears and the multiple dragons that I have slayed, that's why I'm just real unapologetic about, like, I'll stop talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be looking for me. And you won't know what Lana's not responding to my text messages. She's not answering my calls. It could be one or two things. I'm trying to spend less time away from you, or I'm trying to spend no time with you for the rest of my life. Either way. And sometimes it's without explanation, because there are certain people who I know I can't explain to. I could go on and on about that, Paula.
I'm the exact same way in that aspect. Now, in this day and time, it is rare that a really toxic person will find me, but that has happened a couple of times in about a 10-year period.
Mhm.
And I dealt with those people the exact same way. I didn't give them an explanation. I didn't owe them anything. And I just cut it off.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I was talking with someone recently about this as well, is that I experience stages of that. Like when it's time for you to edit your life and cut people out of your life, I experienced the ones that were so blatant
Mm-hmm.
that even people who knew them were like, yeah, you need to cut them off.
Mm-hmm.
But then as time goes on, then it's a little less blatant. And then it becomes a little bit more about, well, their mindset is not on the way to where I'm on the way to. And the more time I spend with them, the less time I get to spend in the correct frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So recently I did a post about what it's like when you have to leave good people behind.
I watched it.
Did you? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crazy thing, because when I say good people, they still do out of order things. But by and large, if the average individual were to spend time with them or get to know them, they would think that they were good people.
Mm-hmm.
And even good people are bad for your journey. And so
Oh, yeah.
I've had good, well-meaning people that I realize, oh, wait, they don't actually value themselves enough to be able to value me.
Mm-hmm.
They don't actually vote for themselves enough to be able to understand when I vote for myself. I had a friend that I've been friends with for over a decade, and throughout the entire friendship, every so often I would get this response from her that was indicative of someone who was questioning my loyalty. I just watched it happen over and over the course of our friendship. And then I got to the place where, like I said earlier, I don't even know how to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
So the only response was to remove myself from the friendship. No explanation, because what am I going to say to somebody who doesn't value themselves?
Exactly.
I'm going to tell you what the straw was that broke the camel's back. I could, but you live very deeply in a world with a bunch of people that do not value you.
Mm-hmm.
You spend a lot of time around people who don't choose you. Therefore, when I come in and I choose you, I look suspect, and I understand. And so the other realization to that is, when it's time to go, it's time to go. And oftentimes we're not as courageous, and we don't leave when we should. And so we stick around until some shit blows up that actually is like, oh my God, can you believe she did that? Well, if the shit would have never hit the fan, you would have never left. So
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I digress.
And I think that this is going to sound hardcore, and it just is.
I love
But
hardcore.
this concept of bus people is actually brilliant
Oh,
because
and that is
it,
my
it
husband. That's how
is.
my husband thinks.
It's brilliant. And I think that probably a vast majority of people are bus people. I call myself a former conformer. And
Yes.
so when someone comes along that says, no, that's it's not black, it's not white, there's a gray area and I'm not in that box and I'm not in this box, then the bus people, their energy gets very, very threatened. They know they're living their lives day in and day out, doing shit they don't want to do, but they are too freaking scared to make changes. And then when they see somebody that's not walking the line and not conforming and playing it safe, and not, in that bubble of safety that you said, it pisses them off.
Yeah.
And that makes them threatening, and they say horrible stuff to people like us. And so dealt with all of that. And so every single thing that you're saying, it just,
It resonates very highly.
oh, yes. And when you were talking about the bubble of safety, I made a little note over here. They never change.
Mm-mm.
They never change. And they don't want
We think
you
that
to
they will,
change.
because we've given them the benefit of the doubt, because we know how much we have changed.
Hmm.
And truly, we haven't actually changed. We've really stayed the same. We've been rebels since the beginning. And so it's not out of character for us to rebel.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, when people put a lot of time and energy and resources into being who they are, and they see you come along happy as a lark, it's like, how dare you? It's like there's ongoing tips between different people, but oftentimes you'll hear plus size girlies talk about how the fit guys and the fit girlies will get in their comments and say ugly things about them. And it's because these people have spent a lot of time and energy to be fit, to be what the world, what society's version of fit is. And here you are, not looking fit and happy as hell.
Hmm.
How dare you? And they
Hmm.
feel like that undermines who they are in a world that's constantly striving for trophies. They've gotten the trophy, and here you are happier than them without the trophy. That doesn't sit well with them. It makes sense to me. I make room for people that do whatever, because I
Hmm.
believe that people do the next right thing in a lot of cases.
Hmm.
For me, I don't know. I just have not been able to conform. I
Me either.
I told my husband when he said he was telling me about the bus people,
Hmm.
in tears, I said, and imagine growing up with the constant whisper, don't get on the bus.
Hmm.
No matter how much they entice you, don't get on the bus,
Mhm.
but still having people wish or talk down to you because you won't get on the bus.
Right. Well, on that note, we get messed up during our childhood. I mean, that's where we get all screwed
Well,
up. I
that's where
mean,
we get our foundation, whether it's messed
yeah,
up or not. That's
yeah,
oftentimes where we get our foundation from.
yeah, because we believe whatever we're told during a certain time frame. When we're like, I don't know, is it like 2 to 6 years old or something? I can't remember the science, but somewhere during,
Six is the magical number.
yes, anything we're told, what we see, we accept it as that being the truth.
Yes.
And when I was little, I mean, the things that I accepted being the truth were absolute freaking lies. There was a truth. Truth was not present. It was all bullshit
Anywhere.
anywhere. And so, in your line of work, I mean, you talk, a lot about marriage and parenting. I mean, it's like everything, life. And so, while we're on this topic of conforming and playing it safe, get on the bus, get off the bus, all of this and the people pleasing. I've heard you talk about people pleasing with parenting.
Mm,
Now, I never had any kids of my own, but when I married Will, I inherited two stepkids. And that
fantastic.
has hands down been the biggest challenge I have ever encountered in my entire life. And people pleasing can come along with that territory. I heard you say in that video that safety looks a lot like conforming because parents sometimes push kids to do what society expects. And they pass on mindsets that were put on them. And you say that parents must let go of those mindsets with me knowing and doing all the inner work that I did, me knowing that the things that I was taught was wrong, I still found myself
Yes.
doing that
Yes.
in a step parenting role, and I would catch myself and be like, "What are you doing?" And so, but at least I had the awareness, and I didn't take it all the way. But
It happens all the
um,
time, Paula. It happens all
yeah,
the time in lots of other areas too.
I would just love to know what did or does this look like for you, in your world with your two boys.
As a mom, I would find myself doing some of the things that I experienced as a kid and didn't like. And because I connect how I feel about certain things, I would pause and I would measure it up against reality, like what's actually going on.
Mhm.
And I distinctly remember my oldest son, my sweet little guinea pig.
How old is he?
He just turned 21 in March.
21. Okay.
My youngest will be 16 at the end of July. Two
Okay.
boys.
Hmm.
So my now 21-year-old was probably about 6 or 7 years old, and we were at an event at church, and he was sitting in an area with his little group. It was him and maybe three other boys his same age. And as a good Southern mama would do, I was across the room. This was at church, and remember, I'm in leadership at church.
Hmm.
And so I'm thinking about that, right? Like I'm in leadership, what he does represents me, all of the dumb crap that that I now know is dumb. And so I see him, and in the way that only Alana can, I walk over to him like Sophia marching through the cornfields on The Color Purple. And I get down and I get my face a certain way. And I say to him, I don't remember what it was, but like, get yourself in line, shut your mouth, pay attention, blah, 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 blah. And my oldest son has a way with his facial expressions that are very telling. And I could see that the look on his face was not, oh, shoot, I got caught. Oh, shoot, I'm in trouble. He looked unsafe.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to let that sink in for a second.
Mm-hmm.
I, his mother, have walked over to him and he now feels unsafe and unsure because I'm supposed to be the foundation of that. I'm supposed to be the foundation of the safety and whatnot, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if you don't feel safe, you don't feel secure, then what do you feel? You feel insecure. And what I realize is the actual opposite of insecure, not being secure, is not actually security or safety. The opposite of being insecure is freedom.
Mm.
And so because my intuition kicked in, I heard myself say to myself, he's going to be a man a lot longer than he's going to be a boy. So at what point are you going to pause on this type of behavior, this embarrassment, as a tool to raise him? And that was it. That was the last day.
Humiliation was like the biggest disciplinarian tool when I was
Oh,
growing up.
oh, honey,
And
yes.
I am telling you, humiliation trauma is not it's for real. And my school teachers did it, my parents did it,
Oh, yes.
any agent of socialization that influenced me, humiliation was used to discipline.
In fear.
And yes, and with my stepkids, that is one thing that I did always keep at the front of my mind. I never wanted to do anything to humiliate them, and I went out of my way not to ever embarrass them. But what I did do was I brought something into step parenting from my socialization, and it was this focus on physical appearance, because a lot of our self-worth was absolutely determined and evaluated based
Yes.
on how we looked on the exterior.
Yes.
And I caught myself more times than I can count on my hands and toes, trying to get them to look the way that I thought that they should.
Same.
Like if they looked disheveled or weren't, completely clean, or they weren't wearing the clothes that I considered to look good, then I would say things about that. And I stopped because I saw that it wasn't working. I wasn't right.
And it didn't feel good while you were doing it. It
It
didn't
did
feel good to
not.
you.
No, it didn't. And it's like I was trying to push, them to be people that they just weren't and didn't want to be. And I caught myself, and I got to stop this, because this was done to me, and I didn't like it.
Mhm.
And so I'm not doing this anymore. And so that is one of the mindsets that I did have to let go of. And this is one of the main things that I wanted to hear you talk about, because this is huge. When you come to
Oh,
this,
yeah.
yeah.
It's huge because even though I'm doing it over here in my little bubble, the rest of the world is not.
Mm-hmm.
Because in our homeschool journey, there have been times where we have done school with other families and also other entities. And I had to let a couple of people know that I don't play that.
Mm-hmm.
I had one woman got upset with my son. She was helping him with a math problem and he dropped his pencil, and she was acting like he threw the pencil. And she got upset with him and she said, and now you need to apologize. And I don't talk to my children like that. And so I'm sitting there, like right there with them, and I'm watching it unfold. And he says to her, I'm sorry. And then she says to him, I don't believe you. And I said, well, damn, you want him to get down on his knees and beg for your forgiveness? And she
Mm-hmm.
said, well, he might need to. I knew then we're not going to be able to keep existing in this. Because
Right.
as a child, I had this keen awareness that most adults were full of shit.
Mm. See, I didn't.
I had this keen awareness. My oldest son tells me that he didn't either. My oldest
Mm-hmm.
son tells me that when he was in elementary school, he actually thought that all adults agreed on everything. So that if he was at school and a teacher said something to him, that his mom and dad would also feel the same way. But I had this keen sense of awareness that adults were full of shit because they would say one thing and do something else, or they would say something that didn't add up. Even as a young girl, like I remember being like 4 and thinking, well, that don't make sense. And so I kept that with me. And as I became a parent, I have this thing that I developed from when I was a kid in elementary school of who do I want to be in this situation? I remember being in school and I remember seeing one of my classmates react to the teacher after being accused of something. And I had done something similar, a few weeks before. And I remember what it looked like when they did the same thing I did. And I was like, ooh, that's what that looked like?
Hmm.
Okay, I got to start asking myself, who do I want to be in this situation?
Mm-hmm.
So my integrity like really became very firm and foundational even at a young age because I was like, there's absolutely nothing that other people can't some kind of way find out about you. And this was way before there were camera phones and AI.
Right.
So that shaped how I show up when I go places. Like I can say I'm this girl or that girl, but what if I run into somebody like I've heard of people going to Korea talking shit about somebody from back in Texas, and then it just so happened the woman who was sitting at the table across from them is also from Texas and is the coworker of the mom of the girl who you were talking shit about. Like, like I grew up
Yeah.
watching movies.
Mm-hmm.
So that shaped the kind of parent that I became because I remember looking at adults like, you just talking, you ain't making no sense. And I didn't want my children to look at me like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so at a very early age, before I even had children, I decided that whatever my children asked me, they were ready for the actual answer at that moment. I trusted God that in that moment, if they were to ask me, Mom, if my 2-year-old were to point to a backhoe and ask me, Mom, what is that? I would tell them what a backhoe was, what
Mm-hmm.
it was used for, instead of giving them the little silly answer. And that shaped how I parented my children because I'm supposed to be their safety. I'm supposed to be a consistent thing that they're able to be tethered to for the rest of their life. And I don't want them to go out into the world and be tethered to something that's wishy-washy.
Right.
And so that's been the driving force of me working on myself so that I could be better at these roles. And so I would find myself apologizing, for doing this or doing that. I have not always been the parent that I am today. I had to grow into her. And because I'm a person who is a rebel, it made it a little simpler. I won't say easier. It did make it a little simpler to push the envelope with my children. I mean, I have family members to this day that think that we're absolutely ruining our kids by homeschooling them. And when I compare my children to their children, we good.
Oh, you can't even get me started on about school. I've always thought that homeschooling was a good idea, and I think that too many kids are thrown into the public school system that don't belong there. I was a person that did not belong in the public school system. I didn't. I was miserable. I freaking hated it, and
Absolutely.
oh my God, and that's where a lot of my anxiety was developed was from public school. And, kids are just thrown into this classroom and they don't all learn the same way. The learning styles aren't the same, but the teaching styles are the same. And so I'm an advocate of homeschool. I always have been. I actually homeschooled my junior and senior year of high school.
Oh, really? Good for
Hmm.
you.
Yeah, I quit high school. I was like, I'm done with this mess.
I love it. I love it.
It was just awful.
From one
And
rebel to another, I absolutely love it.
oh yeah, and I was just like, "Peace, I'm done." And I homeschooled my junior and senior year, and didn't go to college until I was like 25 years old, and I fit in great there. I absolutely loved it, because I wasn't sequestered in this room. It was
And
just
you also got a chance to develop into more of your actual self by the time you got
right,
to.
right, right. And going back to what you said, oh my God, about the awareness that you had at such a young age that adults were full of shit.
Girl.
I did not have that. Now, I could spot at a young age, I could spot a lot of things that my peers couldn't, that my parents couldn't. It was like an intuition kind of thing. But I always did look at most adults, because this is how I was taught. They were right. I was wrong.
Right.
And because I was lied to so much as a child and as a teenager and on into my adult life, I was lied to so much. When I became a step parent, I said, I really don't like to tell all these lies. Like I was so against the elf on the shelf, like stuff like that.
Okay, see, we're gonna have a whole. We need to do this again after Thanksgiving. Because listen, Santa can get it too.
I never led
Santa
them to
can get it
believe in
too.
Santa. I didn't want to do it. I'm like, you teach these kids, they get in trouble for lying, but then that's all we do to them is we freaking lie up one side and down the other. It's these enormous lies.
Listen, life is magical enough. Okay, the
Right.
magic that their parents are gainfully employed and can afford to buy them the things that are on their list, that's magic. And I'm not even joking.
Yes. No,
That
it
is magical.
is. It is. I was raised by, two people that had grown up in, oh my God, the deepest poverty you can imagine. And although I wasn't raised in poverty, I inherited their poverty mindsets, which is
Yeah.
very similar. But yeah, you're right. I mean, here they are, and they get what they want for Christmas, and I'm like, that's got to be enough. I mean, do I have to put on this 2 month charade with this fucking elf? This is
Girl, that elf, let me
creepy.
tell you something. That elf is the devil. Okay. Because listen, first of all, Santa Claus is enough. But
Yes.
secondly, you mean to tell me I got to wait till you go to bed every night and I got to figure out what to do with this doggone thing? And some of these kids are relentless. I've seen, because I've never done the elf on, hell, I didn't even do Santa Claus. So of course we're not doing the elf on the shelf. We did the daddy at work. That's what we did.
That's just like one really big metaphor for just all of these lies.
Yes, Paula, yes.
And I wasn't lied to about things like that. I was lied to things about things much bigger.
Yeah.
But that's a really good example. And so, yeah, and I love your take on parenting and your approaches and how you grew into, the parent that you are today, and you were a different parent to your older son than your youngest son. And that's just so true, because we evolve, and it's like if we're not evolving, then we're on the bus.
I'm transparent about that. Like we have those conversations. Like they understand that. Like I don't want them to listen. I'm trying to head off all the childhood trauma that shows up in your 20s, 30s, and 40s.
Oh, okay. Oh my God, right?
So everything I do is based on I want my kids to want to come and visit me when they're in their 30s.
Right.
I don't want to have to guilt them into coming for Mother's Day or whatever.
I think this is a perfect spot to talk about. You made a video about going no contact.
Yes.
You just said you want to make sure that your kids want to come see you when they're in their in their 30s. Okay. So, as I've stated before, the first 3 decades of my life were pretty sad and chaotic and self-destructive. And, I really had to change everything. And one of the most significant changes I made was leaving a lot of people behind. And one of those people, well, it's a parent. And, you advocate for going no contact with a parent. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't. You're also quick to explain that it's obvious when someone goes no contact for petty reasons, or if they go no contact for legitimate reasons.
Right.
And that's the damn truth.
Let's not be silly. Let's not be silly.
Let's not be silly. Let's not be ungrateful and petty and silly, Yeah, and so in my case,
to think that she's going no contact because she didn't like the Christmas present that she got last year.
Exactly. And so, in my case, I cut ties with my father because, I couldn't handle the mind games and the control and the manipulation and alcoholism and nonstop chaos and violence and just outlandish accusations. I really couldn't handle it anymore. And being associated with him and the people in his inner circle did a real number on my mental health. And there is a such thing as energy transfer. And I found myself really going against my life purpose and who I really was when I was around those people, because I would act like them.
Yes.
And I wasn't like them. And so I don't regret walking away. I absolutely do not regret walking away, but this decision just doesn't suit some people. And I would like for us to talk about that.
One thing I want to say about, you mentioned energy transfer. I don't think that people give it the credit that it deserves. You can watch a movie and just the sound and the music in the background of that movie can cause you to be anxious.
You're right.
So imagine if you are spending the weekend in a city of people who think that way, what it can do to your energy levels. You're going to have to sleep for a whole week when you get back to your regular surroundings, because your peace will be so disturbed. So never think that you're bad or you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing because that affects you. Now, the other thing is, I've gone no contact with people, not necessarily my parents. What I learned is there are some situations that call for no contact, some situations that call for low contact, and some situations that call for editing of roles. And I often encourage my clients, if you take the role away, leave the behaviors the same, but you change the role, instead of dad, change it to boyfriend, or change it to girlfriend, or change it to coworker. No one would question, including you, if you stop fooling with them people. But as in many virtues and many things that we do, we take words that we were taught when we were younger about honoring our mother and father.
Yes.
Sometimes the biggest act of grace and the biggest act of honor you can bestow upon someone is choosing not to be around them. Because the longer you stay around that while you're trying to be you and you're trying to level yourself up, you're going to end up cussing somebody out.
Oh, yeah.
And I realize that there are special situations that require me to be the adult and the authority figure in my life, that require me to be that and make executive decisions. Because sometimes we look at family members, friends, and situations like that, and we're like, man, I just wish but they're fine. It's you that would be in a bad situation if you spent time there, because you have developed to a place where you're so far removed from that's actually painful to just drive into town, like 2 exits before you get there.
Oh God, yeah, I can feel it. Like,
yes,
yeah,
you're having heart palpitations. You got to get your mind together. We don't want to do that, but them. This is their day-to-day life. Their body is adapted. Like, we're sitting here concerning ourselves about them, and I don't want to say this to them because this and that. Baby, they're going to be just fine. And so asserting yourself, disconnecting yourself, reevaluating the situation, getting rid of the roles, because the roles is what trips us up all the time. Yeah, but that's my mother-in-law. Yeah, but that's my coworker. Yeah, but that is also your mental health. They're not suffering. They're fine.
Yep.
You're the one that can't finish getting started this new business you want to get started because your mind is so cluttered and clouded.
No, you're right. And I wish that there was more of an awareness, well, maybe more of an acceptance that just because you are biologically linked to somebody, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. I have total strangers and people who have become friends that have been way more faithful to me than my biological family.
Absolutely. Well, they say that blood is thicker. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb.
Mm-hmm.
which our society has used pieces of that to mean the exact opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Because we've been told blood is thicker than water. That's made to mean that your family, your blood family, is more important than people who you just become friends with. But the actual scripture is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. So that means that when I enter willingly
Mm-hmm.
into a covenant with someone, I decided with my own sound mind to enter into a covenant with someone, that holds more weight than the fact that I was born into this family, the water of the womb.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I've just come to the place in my life, Paula, where I trust me above everybody. I
I
don't
do
care
too.
the pastor at the church. I don't care the president and the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care who you are. I trust me more than I trust anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I get the message down low before anybody else does. So
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
think
right.
it, I think it's important to understand that. And I also think it's important that, to your point, the right people accept that.
Mm-hmm.
The more time we spend with the wrong people, the more we believe, well, people don't really think like that. And really, that's an incomplete sentence. The complete sentence is the people that I have encountered so far in my life don't think like that.
Right.
But there are a group of people that you can be around that think like you, that nurture you, that love on you in a way that maybe you missed out on growing up, but can appreciate better now anyway.
Right. And when I found this, I mean, I found this out a long time ago. When I cut ties with all of the drama and the trauma, then the right people started coming in.
Absolutely.
And as long as a person surrounds themselves with people who are energy vampires and people who stay in fight or flight, they're going to have a real hard time leveling up. Even if they really want to level up and they want to do better and they want to have peace and abundance and be in good health,
So far.
we are what we eat, but we're also who we associate with, and being around people that keep our sympathetic nervous system in fifth gear 24 hours a day absolutely kill us literally and figuratively. I used all of that to cut those ties, and I don't regret doing it, but a lot of people have a hard time fathoming that. They just can't imagine, cutting off a parent, no matter how bad the relationship may have been with their parent.
They're
But
part of the problem. A lot of times those people are abusive people as well, even to a lesser.
yes, that's right. You're right. And they're just carrying on that old family tradition. They're just keeping it going. And they don't realize that they don't have an awareness of that. And
Mhm.
so I talk about this a lot. And when I saw your video about going no contact, it was just absolutely one of the things I had to talk to you about, because that leads in to head trash.
Yes.
And I should have been the poster child for head trash.
I talk about in my book some of the things that come up, that float up into the viewfinder of your mind, your thoughts. And even though we don't necessarily have control over what we think,
Hmm.
we certainly have control over what we do with what we think. But we
Hmm.
just don't know it because it's one of our it's like an app going in the background. You're not actively interacting with it, so you forget that these things are going on. Because let me tell you something, baby, I can ruminate with the best of them.
Hmm.
I can go on an all day thought geological dig
Hmm.
on one thing. And I just realized I needed to start, how you scroll through social media? I needed to start having a list of thoughts to scroll through.
Hmm.
And so I've done things like I've made notes in my phone with a list of things typed out, but I've also made notes in my phone with pictures, on the note that I can just kind of scroll through. are audios that I can scroll through. I have this method that I coined that's called the take, toss, and replace. So you're going to take the thought, you're going to toss it, and you're just going to replace it with something else.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times people think, well, I can't always find the positive in a situation. Well, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying take whatever thought you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
and just focus on a positive thing. Like, maybe you have a fond memory of when you went to Disneyland when you were a kid. Doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if you can just type them out on your phone, you can remember them. I have a fond memory of when I was a kid. This is before my brother and sister were born. My dad, he's a retired firefighter now, but he would come home at 5 o'clock in the morning and he would get me out of my bed and put my robe on, and we would go stand outside and listen to the birds chirping on the power line outside.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a fond memory that I
Yeah.
have, right? To this day, the sound of birds chirping, magical, magical to
Mm-hmm.
me. And so sometimes I'll reach for that. Sometimes I might reach for another thought. But when it comes down to the head trash, I believe that teaching people that the control lies in realizing that they don't have control over it
Mm-hmm.
is the empowering part, because sometimes we don't get it right when it comes to controlling our lives. We try to control things that are outside of our manipulation. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I sometimes when I'm doing a speaking engagement, I'll often use the example that, to try to kind of drive the point home of how you don't really have control over your thoughts all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you're a mom and you're sending your daughter to a sleepover for the very first time, and you've already talked it over with your spouse, you're good with it, and it's the day of the sleepover. You go to drop her off, and as soon as you drive away, you're thinking, what happens if she falls asleep and the house gets broken into? Or what happens if the dog actually goes haywire and ends up mauling all of the children?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you didn't sit down and decide that you were going to think those things, but you did. And the beauty of that is you can go in and you can rewire, literally, not figuratively. Like there are neural pathways that are created, new thought patterns in your brain that become created when you start thinking a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Absolutely.
that's where I often talk about taking out the head trash.
Yeah. Well, my thoughts seriously tore my life apart. And I had no
Like,
awareness of that. And I compare it to eating hazardous waste because that's about
mm,
as much damage as I did to my physical body. And, and in your book, the definition of head trash, the negative thoughts that take up space in your mind like garbage in a landfill, leaving no room for positive thinking. That is, but there is no room. Like when you are absolutely bombarded with that head trash,
mhm,
you really can't see the forest for the trees. There is no space to
mm-mm.
even consider a best case scenario. It's the
Yep.
worst case scenario, and that's the way it's going to be, and that's just it.
That's
You
just
know,
reality. I
that's
mean, it's
just that.
reality.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I operated for so long. And I absolutely created a physical reality that resembled a landfill. It wasn't worth a damn.
All the people, all the places, all
All
the
everything.
trash.
Everything, right down to I couldn't even go to really a restaurant and have a good experience. They would either not have what I wanted on the menu or just something totally stupid would happen. And that's a petty example,
No, no, no. It's a great example,
but it's true.
but it is an example that the majority of us are going to encounter. There are people who are walking this earth that have a problem every time they go somewhere where there's customer service, and they think it's the customer service.
Hmm.
At
And it's
some,
not.
at
It's not
some
always.
point, you're going to realize that you're the asshole.
Yeah, you're attracting it. I attracted it. And when I owned that and I admitted it when I figured it out. Like I really had no idea because I was socialized in an environment where we were victims of chance and we
Yes.
weren't in control. Somebody else was in control. And we really didn't, we were decision makers, but we were just victims of chance. I mean, that's what I thought. And so when all this alleged bad luck just came at me in droves, I was just like, well, this is just the way it is. And I would say I am, destined for disaster. I've been put on this earth to be tormented. I used to say that.
Yeah, yeah. And then you go and you tell people the story about the crappy waitress, and
Mm-hmm.
you tell people the story about the horrible customer service you got at the airport. And so you're just giving life to that. And
Yeah.
then I totally can relate. I totally can. And then one of the best contrasts to that is then when you start telling a beautiful, wonderful story,
Mm-hmm.
and then your life starts to look like that. I have a quote in my book where I say that thoughts are the things that we put out into our lot to create the landscaping of our lives. And it's very true. The thoughts that we think go out into the world to create the landscape of our lives. So
Mm-hmm.
the things that I'm telling you, the flowers are brighter, more vivid now.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that I notice and that I relish in that I have to say to myself, now, Alana, they didn't just put that there.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a new tree.
Right.
You just didn't notice the tree before. And
Mm-hmm.
there's such a delicate balance there too, Paula, because on the one hand, we do understand that how people treat us is a reflection of them,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily a reflection of us.
Mm-hmm.
However, that only rings true when you're walking in through your life with a positive mindset and you're walking through your life taking accountability for your life.
Do you remember how old you were when you started cleaning out the head trash?
I was in my 20s when I realized that I could listen to more positive things to
Mm-hmm.
help me feel better.
Yeah.
And I suppose that is kind of like the beginning of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it was a huge shift as far as, oh, if I change what I experience, I can change how I feel. And
Mm-hmm.
that developed into realizing, oh, I got this stuff just swirling around in my head that can be true, but not necessarily true. And really the big trigger was, and this was still in my 20s, the big trigger for me was realizing that if I continued to think a thing, I would continue to feel bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing I wasn't doing anything. It wasn't like I was getting ready to go meet somebody and I was getting my head together about what it was going to be like. It was a non-existent situation, or it was a past situation that I was continuing to ruminate over. And when I realized that, oh, that's not even real. Like you are pissed off right now because you keep thinking about that thing that person said to you.
Mm-hmm.
And you haven't even talked to that person in like 2 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when I realized head trash probably came to me in my late 30s.
I was 28, 29 years old when I learned about the spiritual laws and I learned about the concept of manifestation. And that is a word that I had never heard before in my life. I was raised to believe that spirituality was like devil worshiping. You were venturing out into a world that was going to take you closer to the devil, and that was not what I was supposed to be doing. Well, guess what? The first Wayne Dyer book that I read, that was the only thing in my entire life that had ever made any sense to me.
Period.
Period. Yes. And so I developed a new fear, but it was a good fear. It was unlike the fear that had been ruling me up until that point because I became fearful of the power of my mind for the first time. And I
Wow.
started using my thoughts to create a better life for myself. And I became very fearful of thinking the thoughts and saying the things and acting the way that I had in the past. And I thought to myself, Paula, it's a thousand wonders that you did not like manifest something irreversible. You're still here. you're going to have to get on the right track. And so getting on the right track for me meant thinking totally different, talking totally different, and behaving completely different. But
it just shifted for you once you read that. Like you were like,
fast.
oh crap, I get it.
Yeah, like fast. And so that's when I started cleaning out the head trash. So when I realized the power that I had and that we all have as human beings, then I was able to get rid of that. And I was able to clean out my subconscious as well, which, I mean, that's ongoing work. I mean, that's something that's just ongoing. But I mean, you know, none of us are finished products. And so, I mean, that's something I work on every day still. But for the most part, I mean, I spent a good 10 years of my life cleaning all of that out. And I used many, many, many tools to do it. But for me, the very first thing was just developing that awareness.
It's like it was time for you. It's like you had been beat up enough that, especially at that age, to read a book that was able to take root in you right away and realize, oh shucks, and understand right away that what that person was saying was true about positive things or negative things. Like if the way I've been talking has gotten me the life that I currently have, my God, today, if I start changing how I talk, what it's going to look like down the road. Even now that I know better, there's still patterns that are part of the script that I just haven't gotten to yet. I haven't reached those yet to dismantle them, but I see the things around me. You know, I see the peace, the absolute peace around me. There's things that I was trying to manifest that I didn't fully understand. I needed to clear out some of the people that was around me before I could manifest that.
Because they'll block it.
Yeah. I wasn't giving that enough credit.
Yes. And that is absolutely significant. And, you know, while we're on this topic, so, you know, we're both life coaches. I'd like to spend the last few minutes of our time because I want people to know how to find you and talk a little bit about what your, coaching business is like. So we both work with people, same line of work. Is there like one overarching commonality that you see in your clients? Because anyone I've ever worked with has one distinctive characteristic, and that's those debilitating subconscious beliefs.
I find that the biggest challenge that they have is putting up what they know they need to do up against the expectations of others. I keep seeing consistently across the board and also repetitively with other clients. Well, I mean, with the same client, just in a different situation, where the actual challenge is not that they don't know what to do. It's that they don't know how to do what they know to do and live up to the expectations of the people around them. And it can be something super simple, like, hey, mom, I'm not going to be able to have coffee with you today. Super simple. It could be something like, hey, a little less simple, we're not going to come home for Christmas this year. And these things just feel so big and so insurmountable that it's like they would rather put their nervous system through this mental and emotional boot camp and then be unproductive or lightly productive for the next week or two when they get back home, than to simply say, oh, hey, we're not going to be able to make it this year for Christmas. I'm not coming to the baby shower, that type of thing.
And productive in our society is never, rest isn't associated with that.
Those are conversations I've had to say too, which again, for my clients, it butts up against what you know you need to do and other people's expectations of you.
Right.
And even perceived expectations.
Right.
There are times where they don't want to rest around their spouse. and their spouse doesn't even care.
It's the meaning we make of things.
That's it. Because that is the other thing I say all the time. Life is just a series of information being presented to us, and we decide what it means.
That's right. That's exactly right. How can people find you? I mean, I'm going to link all of your stuff to the podcast episode. But should people contact you through your website, right?
Well,
if they want to be
with a name like Alana Higginbotham, you got to keep it simple and consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So I am Alana Higginbotham everywhere. It's alanahigginbotham.com. I'm Alana Higginbotham on Instagram and TikTok. I'm on Twitter. And if you want to contact me, you can, all the information is there at alanahigginbotham.com.
The whole reason that I wanted to do the Thought Snob podcast is because I wanted to talk to people and provide discussions that would leave people in better shape than they were when they tuned in. And I really do think that you and I have done that today. There's a lot of good stuff that has come out of this conversation, and I've loved every minute of it.
The Thought Snob podcast with Paula Swope has been brought to you by Thought Snob Media in association with Special Purpose Studios. All production, mixing, and sound engineering by me, Will Swope. We hope you've enjoyed this podcast. Please take a few seconds to give us 5 stars and leave a review. See you on the next Thought Snob podcast with Paula Swope.